So he had asked me about the usage of Jati and caste and Varna. Now the thing is that I had discussed it to a certain extent, and today friend Akshay is not here. So we'll go back to the argument of a cosmology, which is what we were doing before Akshay asked this particular question. Uh, though we will not talk about Jati at some today, uh, or maybe we, oh, he's here. Good morning, Akshay.
Good morning, sir.
So what do you want me to do today?
It's your wish, sir.
No, we left that argument dangling there, right?
Yes, sir.
Hmm?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So do you want me to continue with that argument?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For the benefit of Madam Padma,
Yes, sir.
Akshay had asked this question about usage of Jati instead of caste. And what exactly was it, Akshay? How is it better, or was what was it that you asked?
What is the difference between caste, jati, and varna?
Varna, yeah. Okay, so let's not jump into the deep end of the pool. Just let me quickly go through each of these categories first. Um, the easiest to explain is Varna, but I'll come last to that. We'll start with caste. I'm not going to take too much time since we have already done a bit of caste and Jati. Now, if you look at caste, I told you that it is a word that was brought into India by the uh, Englishmen. And I told you that they were actually stumped by the phenomenon of this segregation or rather, not segregation, segmentation. Segregation would be a wrong word. Segmentation of Indian society. And they also saw that in each of these segments, there was endogamy. Endogamy, as in marriages were within uh, each segment. Okay, and so they saw endogamy, they saw this segmentation, and they saw this hierarchical segmentation. Uh, and they tried to find a word in the English language to try and explain this particular phenomenon. And what they basically found was that there was no word in English uh, to explain the nature of segmentation that these people were seeing in Indian society. So, since there was a problem in terms of not having a word in the English language, they borrowed a word from the Portuguese language. Sorry. The Portuguese language, you have this word uh, caste, which denotes a closed group. And if you remember, I said this is a bit like when we talk about a closed group, it is a bit like the Pythagorean crypt. Okay, that is how you will basically understand a closed group. A closed group is where, you know, you see um, other people not being allowed to enter that particular group. Now, this is precisely what the Pythagorean crypt was. He formed crypts which were closed groups. Not all could get into the Pythagorean crypt. I told you about that whole concept of blood brothers. So that particular thing that we see of a closed group uh, is something which is like, which is what uh, the caste is like. It's like a crypt. People formed castes on the basis of various interests, and I'm not talking about India, I'm talking about Portugal. uh, and they formed these castes based upon their own agendas and interests, and they would say that you cannot come into this group because we don't permit you to come into this group, to someone who might want to join that group, but the group doesn't want that person to join them. So that seemed to be the closest the British could get to the idea of the nature of segmentation that one found in Indian society. And they didn't bother to do any deep research. They didn't try to have a better understanding of the endogamous groups because for them it wasn't necessary. I mean, the British were not trying to do a sociology. What they were trying to do was essentially uh, rule the country. Now, to rule the country, they needed some basic minimum, uh, basic minimum understanding of the social structure. And they thought that with caste, they had achieved that particular understanding. They, they believed that they reached that kind of a goal. Now, what you have to remember is the understanding of the British was only superficial for the reasons that I've already given you. They were least bothered as to why the Indian society was segmented the way it was segmented. Uh, they just needed to understand that these groups were there because when it comes to administration, it becomes important that they understand what was there. So they didn't do anything wonderful. The only thing that they really succeeded in doing was doing a sociology of a cosmology. But to be fair to them, uh, they were not the first people to do a sociology of a cosmology. Uh, it had the process of endogamy itself took the cosmological element out. I wouldn't say that it became um, it became a sociological entity. It didn't. Uh, but the cosmological uh, component that existed originally in the Varna system that had thinned out or it had even become non-existent. Now, if you look at Varna, Varna is an open thing. I'll come to that in a bit. But this particular word, jati, that people started using, this happened around the 1970s, or perhaps even later, 1980s, uh, where sociologists and political scientists were not extremely happy with the description uh, of a caste, okay, because membership to a caste could be voluntary. If I wanted, I could take you into a caste grouping. Whereas that kind of a thing was not possible at all once this endogamous segmentation started. And therefore, around the 1970s, there was an attempt uh, to abandon, to try and abandon the word caste and to pick up an Indian word uh, to describe the phenomenon of this segmentation. Now, what is also interesting here is that a number of Indian sociologists and a number of uh, political scientists were actually copying an international trend. The international trend was that the efficacy of the English language in translating words from other languages, European languages, into English itself was being questioned. It first started with the Greeks. It started with the Greeks because, for example, people were trying to say that what is being called a city state is technically not a city state. Okay, if I may quote FDH Kito, he says it is neither a city nor is it a state as we know it. So what is the solution for that? Call it the police, POLIS, call it the police, describe the police. You simply can't call it the police. You can use a lengthy description to establish what the police is in English and then start using the word police itself. Okay, so that is how it started. Then it also went into the Latin language, where it wasn't as difficult as it was with the Greek language, but nevertheless, there was some kind of difficulty associated with the Latin language. And so, what you see, therefore, is this uh, usage of Latin terms. So, for example, when you talk about laissez-faire, Laissez, laissez, F-A-I-R-E, you're talking about laissez-faire, which is not an English word, but you continue to use it in English. Okay, so, and then it came down to contemporary languages, not classical languages. Latin and Greek were classical languages. Uh, the problems of translation came down into the contemporary languages of English, French, and German, especially German. German, which is a very versatile language, actually, uh, from among the European languages. Uh, sorry about that. And people were essentially looking at German and saying that we are having a problem. We are having a problem for the simple reason, uh, and that simple reason is that people are talking about alienation and Marx, for instance, and you're simply translating that into alienation in English. But if you look at the entire uh, body of work that Marx created, in that you have various different, what should I say? You have various different uh, words that denote alienation. So you have one word which is Enttäuschung, Entauschung, Enttäuschung. Then you have Enttäuserung, Entaussserung, Enttäuserung. And you also had Entfremdung, Enfrungdung. Marx used all these three terms to show alienation. Now, in English, you don't have three equivalents for these three terms. You have only one word, which is alienation. But by simply saying alienation, you're missing out on the subtle variations that exist in alienation. For instance, if you say Enttäuschung, Enttäuschung basically will only denote that you find it difficult to relate to some people or to a group of people or to the society in which you live. It is something like that. If you look at Enttäuserung, Enttäuserung is basically alienation from what is yours. Okay, I will not talk about that in great length. I'll only say one thing. If you remember what I told you about Locke, Locke said that if you expended your energy into the creation of something, then that became your private property. But with wage labor, when you create something, you don't have rights over it. You create something, you give it away, and you basically are paid a wage. So that is alienation from the product that you have created, which is what entoiserung is. Alienation from your own creation. Okay. And if you look at Enfrungdung is something that will basically say that there is some kind of an alienation from the species being of mankind. Now, if you just write alienation, then what about all these differences? Some of them are subtle, some of them are not subtle. They are gaping differences. So people started writing Enttäuschung, Enttäuserung, and Entfremdung while they were doing Marx. So in India also people decided, why should we not fall back on words from our own languages? Why should we not fall back on our own languages? So they considered the term Varna. When I come to Varna, I'll explain to you as to why Varna doesn't fit the segmentation that came with endogamy. So they basically said, we can't use Varna. Then what do you use? After a great deal of thinking, they came up with this particular word, which is Jati. They came up with Jati because they thought Jati is a closed group. But like I was trying to tell you the other day, if you look at Jati, Jati is something which is not an appropriate uh, description of the segmentation that came through endogamy. Jati can become race. Nobody was saying that we are different races. Okay. So nobody was saying that we are a different race. Jati can become race. But these people who started using Jati, they started using it in a restricted sense, saying that a Jati is a segment. And I suppose I remember one song that I heard when I was a kid, and that song went, Telugu Jati Manadi, Ninduga Velugu Jati Manadi. So I suppose they were trying to talk about something which is a loyalty which is primordial. So when you talk about a primordial loyalty, then you are basically saying you have to be born that. You have to be born that in order to be uh, a part of that primordial loyalty. So jati probably comes in that sense. Okay, where you're saying that it is your birth that is determining that you're basically a person with so and so identity. Because please remember, these endogamous segmentations were not just uh, ordinary segmentations, they were segmentations that came with your birth, with your parentage. So I'm speaking to you in English here. You're listening to me. And if we start talking about if I know English, will I be considered, let's for a moment, consider the idea that I know very good English. I don't, I'm aware of that. So please don't think I'm delusional. I'm not delusional. I'm only saying for a moment, or we'll take the example of Padma. Why me? Padma is an excellent speaker of English. She writes very well in English. Can you call her an English woman? Can you call her a Britisher? You can't call her that. So, what will you call her? You will say she's a Telugu because she was born to Telugu speaking parents. Okay, so you'll say she's a Telugu. Just because she can speak English very well, you're not going to say Padma is an English woman. She can also speak English, but by birth, her linguistic identity, in this case, I'm talking about a linguistic identity, is Telugu. Now, when we talk about different identities, the question that comes up is how do you establish identities? Okay, people at one time, people at one time said there were different races. Okay, uh, I told you that the stupid Americans even today use that kind of segmentation. They say Caucasoid, they call themselves Caucasoid, Europeans and themselves, because they are supposed to have originated from the Caucasus regions. And they'll say that the Africans are Negroid, and the Southeast Asians and East Asians, Filipinos, and the Polynesians, and the native populations of the original native population of America, they call them Mongoloid. Now, I keep asking this, where are we in this? Are we Caucasoid? Are we Mongoloid? Or are we Negroid? So they have left us out. Okay. Now, when segmentations are done, please remember, when segmentations are done, it will seem like they are done scientifically. But segmentations are rarely done scientifically. They are done out of sheer convenience. Now, the Americans will call countries like Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, they'll call them Middle Eastern countries. Why are they calling them Middle Eastern countries? If this is the map, this is where America is. Map is obviously the globe, which is like this, has been opened up like this. That is a map. So this is where the Americans are. And they are to the complete west. And they are looking at the east. So these countries, Iraq, Iran, the ones that I have named, they fall here in the middle. So they call them Middle Eastern. And in international relations, after the Second World War, for strategic reasons, for purely strategic reasons, the Americans wanted to divide the world into different nomenclatures so that they could create a foreign policy and also ways of dealing with these different countries. So you have the Middle East, you have countries like India, which are in the southern hemisphere completely, So we are South Asians. Okay. And we go further to the east, Singapore, Thailand, uh, Indonesia, even Myanmar actually, though it borders us, they call them Southeast Asian. And mind you, while they are calling them Southeast Asian, it is not just the geography. If the Myanmaris are people who are Myanmaris are Burmese, the new name of Burma is Myanmar. Okay, so if they are right on our border, okay, and we have people who are Mongoloid in India. Our entire Northeast is Mongoloid, as per the American things. But they don't look at that. They don't look at that. Because India is Southeast Asia, South Asia, it's South Asia. Now, why are the Myanmaris Southeast Asia? They are Southeast Asia because they are Mongoloid. They are Mongoloid. The eastern populations in the southern hemisphere are Mongoloid. So we call them Southeast Asians. So taxonomies, taxonomy or definitions are not always scientific. Very rarely are they scientific. These are things that are drawn conveniently. And I tell my students that you should not be calling the Middle East Middle East. They are to our west. Call them West Asians. Call Tajikistan, call Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, call all these countries Central Asian countries. So the Americans, when they divided the world, and the whole world was following them for quite some time, they did based on their convenience, which is exactly what happened with Jati. Just as the English people did not find a convenient word to describe what was happening and called it caste, our own sociologists and political scientists did not find a word because maybe there's a word in Tamil, but you don't want to use that. Hindi is the national language. So you would have to use something from Hindi. So then you'll say Jati. But you say Manav Jati. What about that? Manav Jati in Hindi is human race. So how is it Jati? So you have to assume, that this is a diminished idea of a race. A diminished idea of a race is Jati when it is applied to endogamous groups. Because in Telugu, what do people say? Kulam. E kulam midi. Kulam, Gurukul, Gurukulam, all these have openness. Please try to understand. All the words that we have seen so far have the idea of openness. I may not be a part of a Gurukulam. If I am not allowed into one Gurukulam, I'll go into another one, which is exactly what caste is. If you don't allow me into this group, I'll try and find another group to go to. So these are not static, these are dynamic entities. Now you need something to show static entities. And it's not easy because what did people understand? People only understood that Brahmins marry Brahmins. Is that so? Even today it is not. In South India, Madhva Brahmins will not marry Smarta Brahmins. And the practices of each of the Brahmin sects differs from the others. So why are you lumping all these people together and saying Brahmins? I'll give you a simple example and wind up for today. We'll pick it up again tomorrow. I haven't finished answering. I told Mr. Akshay Puneet that this will take some time. My own wedding. My wedding, when it got fixed, my dad is what everybody used to call my dad, a cool cat. Mm, he didn't stand on ceremony. He didn't want anything. He didn't want to be the director and say, you do this, you do that. So when the thing came, who's going to select the muhurtam? My dad said, let the girls' side do it. Now, the girl is half British, half Bengali. So they went to a Bengali Brahmin in Calcutta who used to go to their house or whatever. That man set a muhurtam. He set a muhurtam. Now, when this was told to some relatives, they said, you can't have a wedding at 6:31 in the evening. We Madhwas don't have. How are you performing this wedding at this time? And then when we went to look for a Purohit, a Madhva Purohit says, I won't perform your wedding because the day that the Muhurtam has been put is Ekadasi, and on Ekadasi we are fasting, and because we are fasting, we won't perform any ceremonies. So we won't. So couldn't find a Madhva Brahmin. Fortunately for me, a friend of mine got married 2 months before. So I decided, I told my dad, listen, dad, this fellow's got married. Everything is there. All we need to do is borrow that entire set of people to come and perform my wedding. And that's what we did. Some people went, ha, some people went, oh. So these are complex issues. It's not Brahmins getting married to Brahmins. Even in that, there are problems. Motati Reddis don't marry Gudati Reddis. It's below their dignity. Gudati Reddis will not marry Pakanati Reddis because that is below their dignity. Where does this end? Where does this end? I'll stop here today. We'll meet again tomorrow and continue with it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you, sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.